Welcome back to another edition of Lower Keys Living. And today I'm going to take you along fishing with me in near real time, and I'm going to show you those favorite mahi lures of mine in action. Looks like we had a really good weather window here on April 2nd, Sunday morning. So on Saturday, got the boat filled up with gas and topped off. And here's just a quick review of those lures. My favorites. This is a Rapala deep diving lure. I love this little feather jig for my spinning rod. There is my absolute favorite lure for out here fishing, and that is the Billy Bates pink feather lure. And this is the larger version of that with a steel leader and a little bit of weight. I've gotten a few wahoo close to the boat, and they've cut through the 100-pound test that's on those Billy Baits. So this one I'm going big just in case I get lucky with that steel leader. My plan is to head out from the dock on Sunday morning, April 2nd before dawn. And I'm going to start out at the Wilkes-Barre Wreck, one of my favorite places to start the mornings off. And I like getting out there because it gets busy. I like getting out there early so I'm ahead of the other boats. So this is the run out. There's the sun coming up. That's the American Shoals Lighthouse in the distance on our way to the Wilkes-Barre Wreck. So here we are. I got out to the Wilkes-Barre. You can see it's about 7:55 the time here. When I got out here, I was really surprised because this area is fished quite heavily. A lot of people will just figure out which way the current's going and they'll just drift over the top of these wrecks, jigging for fish, bottom fishing, but it's pretty popular. And even when I came back in later in the day, came back past this area, headed back into the bay, there were probably 30, 40 boats over the top of this. So it would have been a little difficult trying to troll through there. But again, this time of morning, I was the first one out here and decided to make a couple of passes. I had two lures out as I was by myself, lots of weeds in the water, so really busy. Trying to keep the weeds clear of lines, drive the boat, navigate, and manage the poles. So had the pink feather lure, the Billy Bait, had that one set about 200 feet behind the boat. And then I had a deep diving Rapala, and I was using a light blue one today, not the normal pink one I do because it's bright sunshine. So I was using that deep diving bait and had about 75 feet of line out for that one. On my first pass coming through, went past both sides of the wreck, looped around. I had to stop up in here, clear the weeds from the lines, reset, came around, got the baits lures straightened out behind the boat. And this time I split the two sections, didn't get anything, but again, got built up with weeds. So I had to stop, clear those weeds again. And at this point, I just made a big loop around because I wasn't seeing anything on the sonar that looked like a good group of fish. So I thought I would just make one last pass before heading out to deeper water to look for mahi or signs of schools of tuna. So came across, set the lines up, and came across the stern section of the Wilkes-Barre, which is where the superstructure of the wreck is held. And if you haven't seen it before, this is the superstructure of the Wilkes-Barre. So we're going from 236 feet deep, and this superstructure rises up to just under 150 foot of depth. So a lot of dimension to this particular wreck. People come out here, they jig a lot for wahoo or amberjack over the top of this. And during grouper season, you'll see people out here bottom fishing for grouper around the wreck. One of the things this wreck is known for are a lot of sharks, so you need to get your fish into the boat quick on this particular wreck. So this is on my final pass over the Wilkes-Barre. You see the stern superstructure here, and if you're not familiar, this side is what your boat is currently over. This is just everything you just passed. And right after I went over the top, I noticed this big bait ball up in here and wasn't sure what it was, but as I passed over, that's about the distance behind where my lures were, and sure enough, both lines went off at the exact same time. Made the decision to leave the deep diving plug, the deep diving lure, the Rapple in because it's treble hooks. I figured I'd probably, more than likely, that one was going to have a more secure hook on it, on the fish, less likely for that fish to get off while I brought the other one in. So I brought the other line in first, and then the Rapala, and you'll see the results of that here in just a moment. So here we are, the first two fish, or should probably say fish and a half on board. So this top fish, this is the one that was on the pink and white billy bait about 200 feet behind the boat, and then I made the decision to bring this one in first. This is the guy that was on that deep diving Rapala plug, and you can see it got sharked. As I was bringing this one in, I was actually keeping an eye on the other pole, and I thought I lost that fish. That pole went slack, and just figured it got off. But I just decided to reel that one in just to check the line, and sure enough, came up with this, and was really disappointed because that would have been a nice size tuna. But they did end up on the dinner plate that night, blackened rapala on top of avocado and pineapple slices and cilantro. Sunday night's dinner. So after leaving the Wilkes-Barre, I headed out to a little deeper water, trying to find some clean patches without the weeds. So started trolling about 7, 8 knots in here. Had the deep diving bait on one side, the billy bait feather lure out on the other side, and it was right here that lure, the deep diving lure, went off. And I thought I was turning the camera on, and you'll see I turned the camera off here. But this is where I landed a nice 33+ inch mahi. So here, after I landed that other mahi, I was trolling out and noticed a weed patch, fairly small one, maybe 15 yards by 15 yards in size, and trolled past that and immediately landed two more keeper size mahi, one on the deep diving lure, the other one on the feather lure that I was pulling. And then I went past it a few more times, but I kept getting weeded up on the deep diving lure. Those treble hooks tend to catch everything that's in the water. So here I was just planning on changing this out and putting a second feather lure on this side, and then decided to pull up alongside that little weed patch while I was doing this, and noticed there was you could actually see the mahi swimming underneath the weed patch. So after I changed this lure out and get a feather rig on to get ready to start trolling again, I decided I'm going to grab my spinning reel and I'm going to pitch that feather jig I showed you earlier into that patch just to see how big the fish were and get an idea of what was under this particular weed patch. So here I'm just dropping that lure back into my box. I keep a pool noodle that I keep all my active lures on, wrap those with leaders on around that, keep them handy and really quick and convenient. And here I'm just going to drop this feather lure back on, and here you're going to see a huge rookie mistake, or maybe a lazy mistake. I get this lure on, I just leave it dangling there rather than pulling it all the way back up and hooking it onto the rod to secure it while I am casting and pitching that little jig rig. And I've done the same thing. The other feather lure that's out, I have left out, that's still out behind the boat. And I do tighten the line up a little bit just to see where that's at. I was actually checking to see if there happened to be a fish on, bringing that in. But I think I was a little over anxious in getting my spinning reel out and getting that jig in the water. One thing you'll find out here on a lot of these weed patches, even when there's mahi around, there's also a ton of almaco jacks around. And they are a really aggressive fish. They chase just about anything that's in the water, and they're fun. We'll fish for them, and they're also a really, really good eating fish. A lot of people pass them by because they're smaller fish, but if I get them in that 8 to 10 inch range, we bring them home because they are easy to fillet, and again, one of the better eating fishes down here. This one was way too small, wasn't going to bother with him. Plus, I was targeting mahi out here today, so this guy is going to go right back in. And keep pitching. And when I'm doing these, you can see the mahi chasing this feather jig every single time, but it's also being chased by the almaco jack, so it's a bit of a challenge going in between the jacks and the mahi, hoping those mahi will grab it first because they're all very aggressive feeders. But with every cast, I could see there were plenty of mahi and jacks chasing it. This one got into a small mahi here, and I could tell he's undersized, and I'm just kind of waiting, kind of giving him a little slack here and there, and you can see the other mahi and jacks following him up, but he came free, which is what I was hoping for. And when I'm out here on these where I know they're smaller, I'm not gaffing them because chances are they're going to be undersized and I don't want to gaff. And it's a little difficult to try and hold that rod up and net them. So I'm just taking a chance here on whether or not I've got them hooked well enough to flip them onto the boat. Here's a little bit bigger Almaco jack. And this, I spent half an hour, 40 minutes out here, and it was virtually every single cast. I was either catching a really small mahi or one of these jacks on. So could have loaded the boat up with the Almaco jacks, but decided not to. Keep those because, again, I was targeting mahi today. This one, again, pitching right back into that weed patch. You can see how small this weed patch was, but a lot of times if I'm not doing anything trolling, I'll stop and just pitch at these just to see what's underneath those. Here, locked into a really small mahi, hoping he would drop off, get him alongside the boat, try and give him a little bit of slack. And it's on this next pitch here, just hoping that he'll drop off, but I'm having to bring this little guy on the boat to unhook him and toss him back. You can see really small one, just nothing compares to the color on the mahi down here. Just love how beautiful these fish are, and they're fun because they're all such aggressive eaters. So here, just pitching off the other side of the boat back towards that weed patch, and gonna bring this one in. This is one of those few casts where I didn't end up with a fish on, but saw lots of mahi still chasing this one. This is getting the end of the where I'm about to wrap up here. We're quite seeing quite as many mahi. Is going to go for a couple more pitches out here. So throwing this one in and actually locked into a really nice size mahi. This one ended up being about 28 inches in length. But here you're going to see the results of my laziness, rookie mistake out here by leaving that feather jig sitting in the water. As this mahi gets close to the boat, yeah, I can see how big he is. Definitely keeper size, one of the nicer ones out here. And he just took a dive and went right underneath that feather jig, wrapped it around it. And as he is frantically trying to get off that hook, he is just spinning and spinning and spinning. And I am trying to avoid that hook from that feather lure that's flying around right now. Trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to get this fish under control without it shaking that extra hook that's just dangling and spinning around off that lure into me? Got lucky. The fish, he got himself off the hook himself, which let me free my line here, but that was definitely a bad mistake. But all in all, a good day. Ended up with those two nice sized tuna and half dozen good sized mahi. So it's a successful day in about 3 hours of fishing time. Hey, thanks for coming out fishing with me today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you like these. We're trying to put out lots of content every week, and we'll see you next time on Lower Keys Living.